Hey everybody, Danielle Hargenrader here, and welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Today, I am very excited to bring you a guest from Australia. Guy Bortz has had type 1 diabetes since the age of 5. He has always been involved in many activities, including rugby, soccer, baseball, and swimming, and more recently, martial arts. He is a strength coach and personal trainer, and also runs a coffee roasting business with his brother. He feels that his experience with diabetes has been extremely helpful in developing a deeper sense of empathy and compassion with others. Guy recently started his own diabetes-focused podcast where his aim is to help influence other diabetics to connect, relate, and laugh rather than cry and get frustrated over the difficulties of living with diabetes. So Guy, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Danielle, thank you for having me on. I'm well. I'm on top of the world. How about you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And I always like to tell people in Australia, if you don't know, we're having a major time difference. So Guy is actually coming to us from the future. It's actually Friday where I am and Saturday where Guy is. So it's all very exciting. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time to join us early on Saturday morning.
Technology these days.
Exactly. So as we always do here on the show, we like to kind of get to know you and how your involvement with diabetes came about. So why don't you give us a little background on, well, since you were 5, whatever you remember of your story of diagnosis and kind of the path you've traveled for the last 18 years.
So, I mean, I do remember it. Funnily enough, I was about, as I said, about 5 years old. My dad, so the Bortz name has an affinity with type 1 diabetes. So my father is a type 1 diabetic, and I have 2 cousins with type 1 diabetes, one of whom is a celiac as well. So but you know what? She's a ball of energy, and she's an amazing, amazing girl. But I digress. So my dad was diagnosed a few months before me. So when mom and dad saw me going to the toilet a lot, drinking a lot, pretty standard, they identified that, okay, maybe, you know, he's developing diabetes too. So the trick that my dad used, at the time it was the 1998 Soccer World Cup, and being a sports fanatic, my dad used to buy us sticker books, and every week he'd buy stickers, you know, and you'd put the player's name in the relative page. And I used to love getting the stickers. I would do anything to get the stickers. So when I was going through the period of mom and dad kind of monitoring to see whether I was diabetic or not and whatever else, dad wouldn't give me a pamphlet of stickers if I hadn't tested my levels. Oh. So dad would say, okay, Guy, come on, we have to test your levels. And I say, no. He'd say, no stickers. So I'd cry and stamp my feet and let him, you know, let him get the finger pricker and prick my finger, as much as I hated it. But it was all worth it because I got my stickers for my sticker book. I remember going to the hospital, very briefly don't remember much, but there's a distinct memory of a dinner time that we had where I think that was one of the first dinners that I came home, and mum just, you know, it took a big toll out of mum and the family at the time. It was something very new to us, something that I obviously can't relate with, and I hope I never have to in the future. But I think if your child is diagnosed with diabetes, it's a big change and a big shock. So yeah, that was the diagnosis. I see it as almost a gift that I was diagnosed at such a young age. To me, living a diabetic life is what's not quote unquote normal, even though I hate that word. It's what's home for me. So I think that's been a blessing, because I mean, I didn't develop it at a later stage where I was allowed to eat whatever I want without any consideration. But like I think you mentioned, I see diabetes as something that it's the same as not being a diabetic, but you know, you just see the immediate effects of what food can do to you. And as a very good friend of mine in the fitness industry said, is we're all going to die of something. So at least you know what sort of areas you're going to be missing out on. So make the most of that now. So I think it's
an interesting.
It's very upfront, but I think it's I like to use a very humorous way of looking at things. And I think, like you mentioned in the bio, if we don't laugh, if we don't laugh, we'll cry, and who likes crying anyway? Yeah. So yeah, so then pretty much I've always had an affinity towards exercise. I was on pens for a long time, insulin pens, until about the age of 13 when I got my first Deltec Cosmo pump. Pumping has been a great thing for me. I found a lot more flexibility and a lot more, you know, I found a lot more control. Now, some people may not agree with this, and, you know, each to their own, but personally, I found that. I think the biggest mistake I made growing up as a diabetic is not educating myself, but rather relying on specialists and the diabetes care team, which is not wrong, but I think with anything in life, I think it's important to educate yourself a little bit, to question what they ask, to what they recommend, and to understand why they're recommending it. And also just to, you know, to be a bit more independent. I think a little bit of knowledge is power. Although power is a dangerous thing, I think a little bit of knowledge can be very empowering. Yeah, so, and like I said, always been involved in sport, love sport, couldn't live without it. I think if I was at a desk job, I think I would be in prison for assault.
Yeah.
So
I feel that
I'd go nuts.
Yeah, I feel very similarly about the desk job type situation. I mean, I've gone through several careers before I found my passion here about 8 years ago. But yeah, I have worked in an office before, and I never actually killed anyone, but I could have seen myself going down that road.
Yeah.
So quick question. I didn't know about you and your father being diagnosed so close together. Now, did you find that to be advantageous to you, or you and your dad still, are you close? Do you talk about that? Was it nice to have that?
Yeah. It has been hugely advantageous, and it's also something that spurred me on to, like you said, like you mentioned, to start the podcast, because I've been very lucky to have someone very close to me. So it's someone that I can share the frustrations and difficulties of diabetes with. But, you know, it's funny, when I speak to my dad about diabetic things, you know, the way he reacts as opposed to how mom reacts is very different. And I find not to mom's fault. I mean, obviously she's a lot more educated now that she has, you know, 2 people in her family, but it's a completely different mindset when you're actually a diabetic yourself, and you can understand what people are going through, and the way you respond to their frustrations can be very helpful. I mean, as long as you try, it's what counts. But, you know, like I said, the way mom reacts versus the way dad reacts, you know, can be a lot more reassuring and kind of relaxing. I think that's what you need when you're looking for comfort, to confide in someone.
Yeah. And I got to say, I mean, I don't know your mom, but I feel like she must be some kind of saint, because to have to go through, I mean, I've talked to many parents of children who've been diagnosed with diabetes, but to have to go through your partner in life, your husband, and your child getting diagnosed, like, that has to be, I mean, talk about an emotional roller coaster. I mean, I can't even imagine. I almost want to, like, just bow to her, because she has to be a very calm person.
Yeah, she's, you know, and it's her baby boy. Not to say that, you know, it's better or worse if it was another, but for her it was her baby son. But she is an amazing woman, someone I look up to every day, because also, I mean, if you could illustrate emotional damage from all the bullets I've shot at her, because sometimes I can't speak to dad, so I just, if I could show it to you, I mean, I probably wouldn't. I'd hide it.
Yeah.
But diabetes is a condition that, you know, is very frustrating and difficult to manage at the best of times. So, you know, I find a lot of respite in confiding in mum. And yeah, sometimes it's not confiding, it's shooting verbal bullets. So she's dealt with a lot in her lifetime, and she's very good at managing it.
Cool. So you mentioned that you started pumping at 13. Now, I'm not going to guess that you use the same pump. What kind of pump are you using now? Or are you? No. So what kind of pump do you use now?
So I was on a Delta Cosmo. They discontinued manufacturing. I'm on a Medtronic Mini 640G.
Okay.
You guys don't have them yet in America, but this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see on the camera
Yeah,
there.
show us. Wait, let me click
Yeah.
on it. Cool. So
Yeah.
is that new
So
then?
it's a newer one. Same, but different. I think there's a lot more advanced features. I mean, with the CGM, what it can do is when you're low or going towards a low, the pump will turn off. It'll shut off the basal insulin. And if I could, I mean, I can't show you now, but if I could show you on my graph, you can see there were times where overnight the insulin turned off. And, I was obviously trending down. And then as the insulin, over time, it quickly crept up and the pump turned back on.
That's a really great feature. I mean, I'm sure
It's a
that
pretty
provides a
cool
lot
feature.
of peace of mind while you're sleeping. I mean, obviously having the Dexcom, for those of us who are lucky enough to have it, it is, a huge relief. I mean, for me, when I was younger, I thought a CGM was like some kind of technology that was just so futuristic and that I would never get a chance to get it. And I actually, much like, I mean, I think a number of people who I had a very uncontrolled, diabetes teenage life, and I had 3 seizures in my sleep from low blood sugars. So having the Dexcom, even though I haven't had anything like that happen in many years, it's a peace of mind. And just to even have that further level of peace of mind where that, God forbid, you don't hear the Dexcom alarm, your pump is going to react and say, oh, we're trending down and we're going to shut off the insulin. That's some pretty cool stuff. I
mean, we're getting closer and closer to having that artificial pancreas. So yeah, I mean, few nicks and crannies that, does better than others. Yeah, so I'm on the 640G, and you know what? Like many diabetic specialists say, it's not the tools that you have; it's the user that uses the tools. So I'm not going to boast that it does any amazing things. It's up to me to.
The tools that we have are only as good as the people who are controlling the tools. That is absolutely true. So let me ask you, since you are an avid exerciser, do you disconnect your pump when you are doing martial arts? Because are you doing gi training or grappling where people are grabbing at you? Have you ever had any issues with your sights coming out or anything like that? How do you manage that?
Yeah. So when I'm doing martial arts, I do disconnect. I do, often with anything, if you're disconnecting, the effect will only be later. So I always like to have a little snack depending on my sugar levels. Beforehand, I'll have a little snack, but I do disconnect. And yeah, I mean, I try and plan the sessions around times where the cannula's been in for at least 2 to 3 days. So changing it is it's a good time to change it. So yeah, sometimes I'll check the side and it'll be completely messed up. Sometimes I'll check the side and it's still intact, which is great because it means that I can reconnect, go home, shower, change it, and then have something to eat. So I still get, can still get a little bit of insulin. And if my sugar levels are a little bit high, I can take a little bit of insulin. Yeah, but I mean, there is a lot of grappling and rolling and stuff. And often when I take the cannula out, there's always more often than not a kink in the tubing because of all of that. But I expect that.
Now, is that a pump where your Dexcom is part of that, or is your Dexcom somewhere else on your body?
So my CGM is so I put my cannula on my butt cheek.
Okay.
So whatever butt cheek I'm not using for my insulin, the other butt cheek has a I'm pretty transparent. The other butt cheek has the CGM. I wish it's something I'd love to do on a 24/7 basis. But unfortunately, the costs of running a CGM are still quite pricey, and insurance have not yet got to the point where they cover it. So, however, in a bid to kind of improve my diabetes, I'm trying to commit to once a month to do a CGM. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to ask you a question, and if you don't want to answer this, you can just tell me to, move along. But since you are younger, and I don't get enough, I mean, I have interviewed a few younger people, but a lot of people I interview are already married. So, and I have talked about this with Carrie Sparling and people like that, just about what are you dating anybody, or when you are going to date somebody, how do you factor that in, especially as a male? Because I've talked about this a lot with a lot of females, but from a male point of view, you know, how do you factor that into dating?
So yeah, like I'll be honest, like it is something that you think about. It's like, oh, they're gonna say a why, like it's a little bit weird, blah blah blah. But you know, once I okay, so you can tell I wouldn't be good at a desk job. The amount I'm moving, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's uncomfortable because, you know, people aren't. It's uncomfortable because people aren't aware of it or aren't informed about it. So without information and education, we can often react very surprised or in a very confronting way. So, you know, like if you see something that's unfamiliar to you, you often don't know how to react, but the way that you often do react can be offensive without your intention being that way. Am I dating anyone at the moment? No, single, playing the bachelor life. But if I am seeing a friend or a potential mate, it's just a matter of, I like to err on the side of being high. The last thing I want is to be on a date with someone and have to throw down a thing of juice. And that's, again, you know, if someone said to me, are your fears of diabetes completely been eradicated? No. I'm working to improve that, but when it comes to going on a date, you know, if my sugar levels are, yeah, okay, we're not looking at a 300-400, you know, reading, but something that's, you know, maybe in the high 100s, just something that I know I've got a bit of buffer zone, because again, on a date, something that can be unpredictable. You might go for a long walk, or you might go somewhere, and you know, you always want to be prepared. And part of my preparation is having a little bit of a buffer zone. And I guess over time, with more and more experience, maybe I'll bring that down. But for now,
do you tell the person that you're dating that you have diabetes, or do you leave, since your sights are on your butt cheeks, and that may or may not come into the situation at some point, but if that's not happening and you're not going to be exposed, do you mention diabetes like straight off, or do you? Generally
some people will see the wire and kind of be like, well, you know, is that an iPod? Like, what are you doing? But if they don't see the wires, like often at dinner I'll be giving insulin, and you know, they kind of say, like, you know, they kind of sit there awkwardly, and I'm like, oh, I'm not texting, like, this an insulin pump, I'm a diabetic. It's a matter of timing, and I think not only on my part, I am very transparent about my diabetes. I think it's important for people to know and be aware, but I think in terms of people's reactions and understandings, I think there's also a matter of timing. Unfortunately, I wish I could just go up to, you know, any girl I'm dating and be like, okay, I'm a type 1 diabetic, this is me. You know, it can be very confronting for them too. So it's a matter of finding the right time to bring it up, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's a good answer. Cool. Yeah. So I hope I didn't put you on the spot too much, but
no, not at all.
Okay, good. So let's move on to a little bit about nutrition. So we did talk about this when you interviewed me, but tell me a little bit about, you know, your nutrition. Like, what do you eat on a regular day? You know, how did you come, obviously, since you've always been into athletics, you know, maybe you've learned through being athletic, you know, what works and what doesn't, but like walk us through like a typical day of what Guy eats to be healthy.
Do we have 3 hours for this? Or?
How about you,
Danielle? I am a huge foodie. I love food. In the mornings, I generally, if I'm going to go work out in the morning, I like to make myself like a shake with a little bit of coffee and protein, and maybe like a banana, or you know, just like a bar before the workout, just to put something in my stomach. I mean, if I didn't eat, I wouldn't die, but I think I like to have something in my stomach. And either for breakfast or after gym, I'll have my oats in the morning. I like steel cut oats, and I put a whole bunch of nuts. And I will admit that I think on a weekly basis, I go through about a jar of peanut butter. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite generous with my peanut butter portions. Yeah, that's love it. Lunchtime, like I'll usually have, it's like lunchtimes and dinners are pretty standard. I'll have a meat, a protein, a carbohydrate, and a fat. Pretty simple. That can range from proteins can range from your generic meat, chicken, fish, turkey, any sort of meat, or eggs. Carbohydrates can range from rice, pasta, sweet potato, quinoa, vegetables. Always have vegetables. So I'll always have a salad with lunch and dinner. And so that's what lunch and dinner can look like. Sometimes it can be pizza, or burgers, but that's, on the odd occasion. It's not an everyday thing.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you. So a lot of people who are, doing certain athletic things, they have, what I hate the name cheat day, because I think the term cheat indicates that you're doing something wrong, which I don't like, the mentality of that, but I don't really have another word for it, like, or a treat.
I hear what you're saying.
But do you do that? Is that part of your regimen? And if so, like, what do you like to have?
I used to have the cheat day, the quote unquote cheat day, eat
or
like a
cheat meal. I'm more of a meal person, not a day person.
Yeah. No, I think I used to do the 6 days of strict dieting and then the 1 day of just splurging out, and diabetic or not, it's not healthy. No. In a nutshell, don't do it. If you want to go into more detail, I'm happy to, but there's at the end of the day, the answer is don't do it. My opinion. Every day, I think being a human being, and I think being a diabetic is all about having a bit of fun with life. And if you're presented with an opportunity to have something that's delicious, take it. If there's a cake, have a slice, don't eat the whole cake. And don't eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's it at the end of the day. Last week, my brother came over to my side of town where I live, and we went and had pizza. I think we had a lot of pizza, and then afterwards he looks at me and says, okay, so there's a really, really good ice cream shop around the corner from where I live. And he said, looked at me and he's like, Guy, we're going for ice cream. And you know what? To be honest, my sugar levels actually turned out to be quite all right. But
isn't it nice when it works out like that every once in a while?
I woke up and I was
like, it's always like, in America, we call that like swag bolus, either like sophisticated wild ass gas or scientific wild ass gas. Like, you don't know how many carbs are in it. You're like, I guess there's 50 carbs in this. I have no idea. And then like later on, like it actually, your line looks really good. And you're like, oh my God, I got it right. Like, it's so exciting.
What's going on here? Like, I'm not 300. So do I have cheat foods? No, because I don't like using the word cheat. Snack foods, treat foods. I love ice cream. I love peanut butter. I
don't think peanut butter, in my opinion, is a cheat or treat.
I think it's a healthy food.
It's a healthy food.
I think it's, but you got to be careful. America likes to sugarize everything. So
I always tell people that there should be one, at the most 2 ingredients on your peanut butter label. The one ingredient, peanuts. And if you like to have a little bit of salt could be in there, but that's it. If there are any other ingredients on the label, it's not peanut butter. It's like some processed like nastiness. And so you'll see like high fructose corn syrup and palm oil and all kinds of weird stuff. So as I tell people, it's like, don't buy the generic, like, mainstream brands. Like, you have to, most stores will have a normal healthy version of it, 100%. But you have to just read the label. Just make sure that.
And that's where educating yourself becomes really important. One question before I continue: crunchy or smooth?
I have smooth, but I could do.
Oh, Daniele.
I don't want more stuff in my teeth than I don't know. It's just not. I don't know.
I don't know if I can continue. No, I am an avid crunchy fan.
The connection is getting fuzzy. Yeah.
So as I said, ice cream, the odd pizza and burger. I'm a big foodie, so anything that tastes good. But again, like anything in life, it's all about balance and moderation. And just because you're a type 1 diabetic, that shouldn't change. I think life is way too short to not enjoy the foods that we love. But I think it's a matter of enjoying it. Like I said, have 1 scoop of ice cream, don't have the tub, and don't have it every night. But and I find if you do it that way, you enjoy it much more. You don't restrict yourself with rules and what you're allowed to and not allowed to eat. Don't punish yourself if you've had. I mean, I shared 1.5 pizzas between me and my brother, but just keep in mind, Australian pizzas aren't as big as American ones. But
is that right?
I shared a pizza and a half with my brother, and then had ice cream. And you know what? I enjoyed it, and I'm not going to punish myself for it, because I'm a very active person, and I know regardless that's not a good path to go down.
Trust me, I am from my past, I know all about the punishing yourself for eating, and that's certainly a downward spiral, or actually what it is a vicious cycle that never ends until you change your habits. So I agree. If you're going to eat something, commit to it and be done with it and then move on. I'm 100% on board with that as well. So let me ask you this. So you've been doing a fitness podcast for a while, and you just started your diabetes podcast, and you're obviously a trainer and all this other stuff. So what is in the future for Guy? Like, what do you see for yourself in the future? Or what do you imagine for yourself in the future?
Who knows? Again, like diabetes, the life can be very unpredictable. But what I'd like to see is, at the moment, my kind of mantra in life is just learn, always learn, network, and just have some fun. So in terms of learning, I have a goal. At the moment I'm teaching myself Spanish, and I'm very, very lucky to have my work colleague. He's Colombian, so we speak Spanish all day to each other, and that's definitely accelerated my learning. I'd like to learn a martial art. So at the moment I'm jumping between gyms at the moment to find the right fit, but jiu-jitsu and judo in the past have been something I've been committed to learning. And a musical instrument one day. Language and martial art is enough for now.
Those are great ways to stimulate your brain. I'm telling you.
100%. 100%. And I think, so what holds the future? To be honest, Danielle, I don't know. I would like to know that I'll challenge myself. So at the moment, running the business with my brother every day, new challenges kind of come up. For instance, this last week I've been training people how to make coffee, how to be baristas. So that was a new challenge for me. And as long as there's challenges every day, because if we're not learning, we're not growing. And I just think there's so much to learn out there, and it's so inspiring and so interesting that why wouldn't you want to? So to give you a very bad and vague answer, as long as I'm still learning and challenging myself, whether that be even living overseas. I mean, I lived in the US for a year and had the time of my life, and I wouldn't rule out coming back again.
Nice. Well, and I don't think that's a bad answer at all. I mean, that's one of my mottos in life, is that if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not learning, you're stagnating. And I'm always like, I'm a student first. I might teach people to do things every day, but I say, like, I teach in videos and, like, don't have what I call I already know that syndrome, because there might be something that but if it's beneficial to you and it's not part of your daily practice, do you really know it? Or are you just saying that you know it and you're dismissing it so that you don't have to listen? So there might be something that I've heard 100 times, but I'm like, well, I'm not really doing that every day though. So I don't really know that. And that's what I think people have, that I don't know. I already know that syndrome. Just learn, just be open to listening to people. And I just am a firm believer of, if somebody comes into your life for whatever reason, there's a lesson to learn, and you have to be open to finding that lesson. And it might not be, the way that you wanted to learn that lesson, but that's the way the universe is presenting that lesson to you. So just be open to it, and don't close yourself off and say, I already know that. So I think for your age, it's very exciting when I meet people that I'm like, okay, there is hope for the future.
Well, I mean, diabetes is like that, like anything, you learn, you can kick and scream and cry about why your sugar levels aren't right, but you can just take it as a lesson and make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future, or that you manage it better. I think, like you said, there's a lesson to be learned from everyone. Something I learned very early on in my strength coach or personal training career, training a 12-year-old kid. Don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from him. I think everyone has different experiences and you have different ways of learning. And I think something I'm definitely learning to do is to just listen. I think humility is a very rare trait in people, to be coachable. And I think if you're coachable, people will like you more. And if you give it a go, you might realize that you think you know what they're going to say, but my dad always taught me to bite my tongue. So I generally do bite my tongue to avoid myself speaking, and often I learn something new. So I challenge all the listeners to, next time you want to interrupt someone thinking what they're going to say, bite your tongue and just wait to hear what they have to say.
I like it. All right, cool. Well, as we do towards the end of all of our interviews, would like to know what your top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes are, and what they've come to be over your last 18 years with diabetes.
3. Okay, so please don't judge me on the 3 that I select. I think number 1, I'd say, is educating yourself. I think in the past 18 months, there's been a big shift in my diabetes management in understanding the consequences of not looking after yourself properly. So, and I blamed a lot of that on everyone else. I blamed my mum, I blamed dad, I blamed my endocrinologist, and I blamed my educator, where at the end of the day, it's my fault that things weren't going right. They are all tools to use for emotional, let's just say, to confide in people, or whether it's professional to teach you the principles and tools of managing diabetes, but it's up to you to learn the ups and downs. So I think educating yourself is really great, and listening to this podcast, if you want to call it, of yours, Danielle, of listening to what, little snippets of what other people have to say. Podcasts like the Juicebox podcast is a great one. My podcast, if you want to listen to it, is Podabetic. Reading books at the moment, I'm reading Sugar Surfing by Dr. Stephen Ponder, great book. Another one I can recommend is Pump Like a Pancreas by Gary Shiner, great book as well.
Yeah, you're right. I agree, but it's Think Like a Pancreas. Gary, don't get mad. It's Think Like a
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Gary, please don't hate me for it. He's going to, next thing, because he's my educator, he's going to kick me in the butt for that one. So number 1, educating yourself. I think knowledge is power, like I said, and I think if you empower yourself, you're all the better for it. Number 2, mindset. Don't be a robot, be human. Diabetes is a rough disease. It's tough. It's a full-time job. It's a full-time and a half job. It's at the best time it sucks. At the worst times it's great. Looking back, it's given me a lot of lessons and made me who I am today. And if you just look at anything that you've had experience with diabetes in a positive light, you can see that there are some positive things that do come out of it. As much as a 23-year-old, I mean, I'd love to be irresponsible and go on the weekend and party and do what boys like to do, but it's instilled a sense of responsibility in with me, and that's what's allowed me to be who I am today, which I'm very proud to be, a young, successful, hungry young man. And last of all, just have some fun. Don't take it too seriously. Eat the ice cream, have a high, have a low, but laugh about it. Don't waste your energy stressing.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I have to agree with everything that you said. I have to thank you for joining me today. And it's nice to get a different perspective, whether it's from a young guy, like you said, a nice young man like yourself, someone from another country, all of these different things, because a lot of times, like you said, we do get kind of boxed into, well, this is my life, this is what I know. And a lot of us just don't realize, even myself, before I got involved in the diabetes community online, is that there's just a huge, giant community out there full of information. And all you have to do is search for the information that you're looking for, and you're going to find it. And oftentimes you'll find people that you can easily connect with, whether it's on Facebook or, Twitter, or just emailing somebody. The people in the diabetes community are so open and willing to share and talk. So, just understand that you're not alone, and do 100%. All the things that Guy said. And yeah, awesome.
And I mean, for those people listening, I mean, you might think that Danielle and I know each other for a long time.
No.
I emailed Danielle like 2 weeks ago to do a podcast out of the blue. I'd heard her name recommended by a couple of friends of mine, especially Dr. Gary Shiner. And here we are today. So, yeah. And because of Danielle, I got onto other people, and other people, it's a domino effect. So the worst that can happen is they don't respond to your email. That's the worst.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree. And that's how I got started too. Didn't know anybody from anybody, just started emailing people randomly. And what do you know? A couple years later, here I am, and I'm helping other people get started. So yeah,
That's it.
just get some support. You're not alone. But the thing is, the support's not going to usually fall into your lap. You do have to reach out for it. So reach
Oh,
out.
100%.
Don't be shy. And cool. So is there anything else that you would like to add before we close this out?
No, just keep pumping on, or if you're not on a pump, injecting on, I guess. Yeah, and I mean, like Danielle said, you're gonna have to find it. Unfortunately, you'll have to go through some less favorable or less reputable people, but as long as you keep asking questions, and you'll find consistencies of hearing the same name over and over again, and eventually you'll be able to get a name that you trust. And it's a process. So enjoy it.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Guy, for joining me. And as I always do, I will post any links that Guy gives me that he wants you to be able to contact him or follow him, or any social media that will be below the video on YouTube and also below my video on the blog. So thank you for joining us, and I will see you all on the next episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Bye, guys.